Thanks everyone for coming out on a beautiful Sunday morning to cover this important issue. We've heard quite a lot of new information about the city's budget in the last few days. The City of Buffalo Comptroller Barbara Miller Williams has released an assessment of the acting mayor's budget. She says she's deeply concerned about the city's finances. She notes that the proposed budget is over-reliant on uncertain revenue sources and under-budgeted appropriations. Erie County Executive Mark Poloncarz has also conducted an analysis of the proposed city budget. He estimates that the city's actual deficit exceeds $70 million. He also notes that the proposals the acting mayor has been advocating for would not actually bring revenue that the city needs quickly enough to close this year's budget gap. It's clear now that a new solution is needed to address the city of Buffalo's financial crisis. I've been working behind the scenes to put together a responsible proposal that will resolve the city's financial crisis, provide long-term stability, and give city leaders the certainty that they have requested. By doing so, we can prevent massive tax hikes, and we can prevent cuts to fire, to police, and to other city services. Today, I'm announcing that I'm introducing legislation to allow the Buffalo Control Board to issue deficit finance bonds. This is a financial tool commonly used by municipalities to cover budget shortfalls. The Buffalo Control Board will be able to issue a bond that covers the city's entire deficit of $70 million. It will also, I'll do that again. The Buffalo Control Board will be able to issue a bond that covers the city's budget deficit of over $70 million. It will also cover projected deficits for the next 4 years. Authorizing the Control Board to issue the bond would stabilize the city's finances in the long term. The city will be able to use the reoccurring revenue sources, such as revenues from the city's parking ramps, which generate about $4.5 million a year, to pay for the bond over time. Deficit financing bonds are a tool that help local government resolve their structural imbalances so they can focus on long-term budget stabilization. This is a common financial tool that has been used by municipalities throughout New York State. Olean, Yonkers, Rockland County, Lockport. My plan would give the city of Buffalo some breathing room that it needs to bring long-term stability back. The city have asked for certainty about what support they're getting from New York State. So I'm giving them that certainty. I thank the Buffalo Comptroller Barbara Miller Williams and County Executive Poloncarz for their thoughtful analysis of the financial difficulties of the city. Fixing the city's finances, it's not a short game. It's a long-term thinking and long-term planning. It requires careful thought, long-term thought, and smart solutions. Experts who have looked at the acting mayor's proposed solutions have concerns that it would not generate the revenue the acting mayor has promised. It would deprive the city of long-term revenue sources, and it would come with significant financial risk. The city doesn't need more magical thinking and another year of a one-year gimmick. Buffalonians have been through enough false promises and silver bullet budget ideas. We deserve better than that. We'll never achieve our full potential if we keep planning the city budget around short-term gimmicks and imaginary revenue. I'm prepared to meet our challenges head on, something this administration has shown it's unable to handle. My plan will give the city the necessary tools to do the right thing by the people of the city of Buffalo. And it will allow us not to address this year's projected deficit, but deficits in the years ahead to finally get us in a long-term situation that is stable. Selling revenue $50 million. Now outsiders are saying it's in excess of $70 million, heading to upwards of $100 million. Still, this administration won't come clean about how bad the problem really is. No multi-year plan, no analysis of the fire sale of city assets, no genuine community support or dialogue, just more of the same. One-shot gimmicks, year after year, budget after budget that got us into the mess we're in. Buffalo needs long-term financial stability, and this is exactly what my plan would provide. Thank you, everybody. Jim.
How would Wall Street react to deficit financing bonds? You went through this before for the regular budget days.
We did. You know, I have experience working with municipalities to get them out of budget holes. I worked with the county after the red-green budget to get the county back on long-term fiscal stability. And look, county's been stable ever since then. When I came into New York State government, we were reeling from a recession. We had to make massive cuts, change our revenues around. But we did it. We did it by coming up with realistic projections. What are our expenses? What are our revenues going to be? And make a budget that matches that. Wall Street won't give the city of Buffalo the tools to make this borrowing because the city's too unstable. But the control board would be given the authority to make this borrowing, and they would be looked on favorably by Wall Street, and they will have a much better interest rate than the city could ever achieve. This is close to adult supervision. I mean, honestly, what we got to get off this one-year gimmick. Like every year, the cannabis revenue is going to save us. The gambling revenue is going to save us. The federal government's going to save us. And every year, you restart the year in another huge debt. As proposed now, the city will run out of cash by the end of the year, and we'll be back here in a year from now saying, oh, I can't believe we're in debt, and I don't even know what my debt is. Like, we got to get out of this cycle. Buffalo deserves better.
Been critical of the, you call them one-time gimmicks.
Yeah.
Scandal administration.
Right.
How is this different from that, given that you're just giving yourself more time? The gimmick's not necessarily providing cash for the city or revenue, but time to figure out these issues.
Yeah, I mean, the gimmick is it just gets you through the next quarter. Years. You then bond an appropriate amount of money that will be paid over 20 years. And during that period, you work with your expenses, your revenues come up, and that's how you get back on sound, long-term financial footing.
So will this impact Buffalo's bond rating if they have to do other projects down the road?
No, because Buffalo's bond rating is separate. It would be separate from the fiscal authority's bond rating. Buffalo will continue to do their bonding for their long-term capital, but this would be, this is a vehicle that allows for deficit bonding. This is how cities that have gotten themselves into real structural unbalance, this is how you get out. It's like refinancing your mortgage. You hit the reset button and you're allowed during that time to get yourself back on footing. And that's what the city needs. They just don't need breathing room so they can walk away from the problem. They need the time to actually develop a solution to the problem, not just a gimmicky can kick that gets you to your next mortgage payment that you can't make.
Just say then over those 4 years, what would be your plan, say you're elected, to balance the city's budget? If this is a hand
Yeah, so you start balancing it by getting out of starting every year with the deficit. Then you're able to create your plans every year, but knowing in advance what your expenses are going to be. So in the state, our 5-year plan is very accurate. We know in 2027 how much we're going to spend, and we know the revenues we have to bring in to meet that. If the revenues are lagging behind, then we cut our expenses. But we do it actively throughout the budget year. Every quarter we do this. But you can only do it if you actually have a long-term plan. And that's what you set your barometer by, every quarter when you check your finances.
So what steps are needed to make this?
We need to change the control board legislation to specifically authorize them to do deficit financing. So small amendment to that legislation, and that would give them their permission to go to Wall Street to come up with bonds to pay this debt. Because if you don't do it this way, then you're back to these massive tax increases that everyone's afraid of, and we know that Buffalonians can't handle. This is restructuring. This is the way you do it, and this is the way you get out of your structural imbalance. I mean, how many times have we heard in the last 10, 20 years, Buffalo's budget is structurally imbalanced? That means there's no apparent revenues to pay your upcoming expenses. You got to get out of that situation if you want to grow and prosper as a city.
Is Buffalo's Chapter 11 game plan, do you think?
I would just call it allows you to acknowledge your long-term debt and that they don't match your short-term revenues. So you take your long-term debt and you pay it off over 20 years, and then your revenues will be able to meet them. And how do you make that payment? Well, part of what you do is don't sell your assets that generate revenues. The parking ramps make at least $4.5 million a year in revenue. That's how you get out of this. But the last thing you want to do is do a fire sale and actually sell something that makes you money.
Is there not a concern that this could compound the issue of city finances? You're having to bond for this, that bond would have to be paid back in some capacity, that burden annually would not hurt the city long term, because there'll be additional plans for additional adjustments as you mentioned.
Yeah, no, this is the way to achieve long-term stability, that you take out a debt at a really low rate and you amortize it over 20 years. So we know that the debt the city has got into at present time, it can't be paid back with our current revenues. Like, we can't do massive tax increases. It's too destabilizing. So that's the situation you're in, but you have to acknowledge that situation. And all we've been doing in the city is whistling by the graveyard, pretending, it'll get better next quarter. But it's not getting better. I mean, our deficit it's unknown right now because the acting mayor hasn't come clean. And you heard the city comptroller came out yesterday, the county executive came out yesterday and said, these are bad numbers. We got to get the good numbers. But the truth of the matter is, the debt is so high, it can't be paid off in a year by city taxpayers. So we have to go to the second solution, and that's got to be a long-term solution. And you do that by issuing deficit finance bonds.
We'll just say that long-term solution, again, if you're elected, I kind of led with this question, but can you provide any specific examples of things that you would see be needed to rebalance the city's budget, whether that be a tax increase or you mentioned the revenues from the
Revenues should go up every year because your property tax values go up every year. So your levy should be going up every year in value. And with that levy going up in value over 20 years, it should match the debt you're paying on your long-term bond. But what they're trying to do now, as opposed to paying this debt that they got themselves into over 20 years, they're going to try to pay it immediately by having a fire sale and having massive tax increases. That is not good for the city of Buffalo. That will not allow us to prosper it will not allow us to grow. And it'll put this problem squarely on the backs of low-income homeowners. That is no way to get out of the problem that they created. We've been talking to everyone's teams about this, about a better solution, because the parking ramp idea is, it's really based on magical thinking. You came up with a plug number. Oh, I think they're worth $40 million. How did you establish that value? Well, because that's how much debt we have. It's not how you establish values. And plus, why would you ever sell an asset that generates nearly $5 million a year? We're standing in a city asset right now. This doesn't generate revenue. Delaware Park doesn't generate revenue. Martin Luther King Park doesn't generate revenue. The parking ramps generate revenue, and you use your revenues to cover your expenses. But if you sell your revenue source, what do you got left?
I think part of the concern with the parking ramps is the finance commissioner has attested to that there's concern about structural integrity, repairs, and those costs would
Sure. So play that one out. Play that one out. If you're issue bonds, what are you going to look at before you issue those bonds? The long-term viability of the parking ramp, what their expenses are, if they need all this work, and if they need all that work, guess what? No one's buying those bonds. Because how would you ever pay your bonds back if you buy something that needs more work than the assets generate? It just goes back to this, there's no paper behind this concept. Like, if what's been reported is true, then nobody would buy that asset. Who would give you $40 million for something that they're now claiming, somehow is unstable down the road? But these transactions, they take a long time. So, if we give the city authority to create this independent authority to sell their parking ramps, the first thing they have to do is they go bring in bond counsel, they bring in engineers, they bring in accountants, they bring in actuaries, and they figure out what this is worth. But this idea that somehow we got to get rid of them, well, if that's true, then no one's going to buy them.
Just to piggyback off Jim here, with discussions, the state budget still, we don't have one at this point, the suggestions from the acting administration, any status update on those that you can provide, that despite it being your opponent, you are...
No, we're all looking at this, we're looking at all the stuff, but we're starting from this idea, we don't want to do harm. We don't want to cripple the Buffalo hotel industry over $2 or $3 million of revenue. We're talking northwards of $70 million in debt, and we're having a long, protracted conversation about something that might bring in $3 million. That's not solving our problems. And we're having this other long, protracted conversation about something in the best case will bring in $40 million. Well, that doesn't get us anywhere getting out of this year's debt. And that's why we have to look at solutions that actually will provide a structural balance to our budget. And this is the solution that will get us there. Because everything else is just getting us to a quarter or maybe 2 quarters, but it's not getting us anywhere close. And to return to this concept of these bonding for parking ramps, these things take time. So you have to set up an authority, then you have to go get the bond councils involved, then you have to get the engineers and the actuaries. The thought of this money actually being seen by the city during this budget year, that's a long shot proposition.
And this plan would be ready for this fiscal year?
Yeah, no, it'd be ready right away. So, the control board already exists. It's in statute. It is already bonded. It's still paying bonds back. So Wall Street knows what this entity is. They understand it. It has a credit rating. And so this will be the simplest solution to get this going. But once again, just to return to, I don't want to solve Buffalo's problems so we can get through the next 3, 6, or 9 months, because this is what we've been doing year after year. We're at the point now we have to embrace a long-term solution to get us to fiscal stability, and that's what I'm delivering to the city of Buffalo. All right, thanks.